All right, here we are for part 3 of the grid compositing demo. I have put 11 of my 12 image fragments into my blank canvas area. I've got one more to go. Here it is. I'm going to drag that last image element thumbnail onto my blank canvas, which is slowly becoming my gridded image. And I'll close up that image element, which I don't need anymore. And here is my grid, and I'll drag this last image element into place. Now you notice again how it snaps in there and you get those little magenta lines. That's because snap is turned on, and snap can be found in the view menu of Photoshop right down here, snap. When you have snap on, which you see with the checkbox there, that means that your image elements will kind of magnetically grab to the edge of your image file, to any grid lines that you have set up or guides that you have set up, or other image elements. So that's what was allowing these pictures, these image elements, to kind of snap right to the dimensions of the other image elements that I already had in there. And we can see in my layers palette, if we look down here in the right bottom corner, there are all of my different image elements, and I can turn them on and off one by one, their visibility, if I want to. So they all line up kind of perfectly as far as the edges of the images, the dimensions of each frame. They don't line up so perfectly in terms of what's in the picture. And I don't think that they ever will. That's not really the point of doing a grid. But if I decide that I want to try to move these and get them to line up a little bit more, I can simply use the move tool, which we talked about in the upper left corner there, the very top tool in our toolbar. If I have that activated, I can grab any image element and move it around. However, with snap still turned on, it may be difficult to kind of freehand move these things. So what I might want to do there is go into, oh, I actually had to turn it off. I was wondering why it didn't magnetize. So it may be hard to freehand move these when it is magnetized, but if I go to the view menu and I turn it off, now I can move these a little bit more gradually, and I might be able to bring them in. Let's say like I'm looking at that hooded wizard figure in the Led Zeppelin poster tapestry thing. If I want to line that up a little bit better, I can do that when I move these grid elements individually. And I can do that with snap turned off, and makes it maybe a little bit easier. So that's something else that you can play with in setting up a grid, is how much do you want these image elements to kind of precisely match up. You may never get them to precisely match up, but might be kind of interesting to try. Another thing that you can do is then play with the opacity of these different image elements. So let's say if I go up to my grid composite 12 fragment, which is this, I'm sorry, it's this bottom right one, and I reduce the opacity of that element. Now I have like this kind of transparent thing, and I can see maybe more exactly where elements of that line up with the background, other things that I'm putting on it. And I can bring the opacity back up to 100%. So now this kind of lines up a little bit more precisely. Maybe I'll try to do that over on the left side with these repeated drum elements there. So that would be image 5 and image 6. If I go down, let's say, to image 5, and I select this layer here and change the opacity of this one down to 50%, or roughly there, then I can take that image element and move it in and line it up there. Actually, I guess I would probably need to also make image 6 a little lower opacity so I could kind of see how they overlap with each other. And maybe I'll try to line up that one drum. Maybe then I go back to image element 1 and make that image element down to 50% opacity, and I can move that in and maybe try to line up the elements of the poster in the background. That's a Rush 2112 poster, one of the great albums of all time. Anyway, so I can do this little by little and find these different image elements. By the way, with the move tool, if you click on an image element, generally your layers palette will automatically switch to the layer that that image element is on. So maybe I reduce the opacity of image element 9, and I can move that in and line up like this frame over here and this little computer mixer drum brain thing there as much as possible. And they're never going to again, they're never going to completely align perfectly. That's kind of not the point. But you can do this kind of little by little. Let me go down to this foreground element there. That would be probably image element number 10. There it is. It already got to be selected. And I'll reduce the opacity of that one and move this one around into place. So you can see, like, little by little, you can kind of get them lined up a little bit, the image elements within each frame. When you're satisfied with all of those, you can turn the opacity of each of those layers back up. I forgot all the different opacity or different layers that I have changed. But let's say I go one by one here. Okay, this one needs to come up. That one doesn't. That one doesn't. That one, yes. Bring that up to full opacity. Image 5 is fine. No, image 5 needs to come up. Full opacity. Image element 4, no. Image element 3 is okay. Image element 2, image element 1 needs to come back up to full opacity. And now we see, if I zoom in a little bit here, that these things begin to line up. They still have a little bit of a piecemeal grid kind of feel, which is the point of doing a grid composite, but the image elements begin to line up a little bit more consistently. At a certain point, when I'm satisfied with this, then I can save. And in this case, I'm going to need to go up to the File menu and hit Save As. Now this is going to be a really large file because you've got a lot of different images, you've got a lot of different smart objects all in one thing. I'll call this maybe Grid Composite Complete and save that off. So you can see this and hit Save. One more little wrinkle I'll throw your way is if you wanted any of these image elements to look a little bit different, maybe the exposure wasn't so great, maybe the color balance is off, maybe there's something, you have two options. One is that you can double click back open the smart object of that layer. By double clicking that smart object icon right there, you can open that image element back open as a smart object and readjust it. If it's a raw file, this is a JPEG, so it's not going to work so well. The other thing that you can do is to create an adjustment layer, and I can't quite see that menu, but there it is. Create an adjustment layer that will go above a particular layer, and before I do any adjustment to it, if I go into the layer pop-out menu, you can't really see that in this frame. Let me go to the layer menu and see if you can see it there. Layer menu, and what I want to do is create clipping mask. And that means that this new adjustment layer that I've created is only going to affect the next image element below it. So if I maybe deliberately wanted to make that one image element lighter or darker, maybe to make it look deliberately more fragmented and grid-y, I can do that. Again, I'll go to the second composite layer here just so you understand how I'm doing this, and I'm going to go and create a new adjustment layer here. I say let's just for fun, let's do black and white. And if I create a black and white layer, you'll notice at first that both of these fragments get made into black and white because that black and white layer is affecting everything below it. But what I will immediately do is go to Layer menu and choose Create Clipping Mask. And that clipping mask, as you'll see right here, it has a little down arrow saying I'm only going to affect the next image layer down. And so it only made this image element black and white. So that's another way that you can individually affect your different image fragments. All right, and I think that concludes part 3. Enjoy making your grid composite.